I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked. If you're serious about your career, this show is for you. And in your career, whether you're a formal leader or not, you are always the leader of yourself. Unlocked is a show all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. Our topic today is creativity as a path to success. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Unlocked. We'll be talking about creativity as a path to success. In my research, one of the characteristics of highly resilient individuals is that they are insatiably curious. One of the practices I talk about in my book, Unlocked, is to ask a question every day. You see, asking questions is one of the best ways to nurture your curiosity. Now, you may think, why am I talking about being curious? What's its relationship to creativity? Well, as I said, curiosity is one of the traits of highly resilient people. But to me, the really big deal is that when we are curious, we create a larger world just through our questions. There are more and more possibilities revealed. And you all know that opening possibilities is what this show is about. And don't tell me that you don't want your world to enlarge. We are all concerned about finding new ways to do things, to overcome challenges, to bring more people into our close association. You know, as I trained as an artist, I was trained to see everything that is around me. Over time, seeing things stimulates even more curiosity. Over the years, I realized that the more curious I am, the more I learn about others, not just to learn about them, but to understand them and then to appreciate them for what they bring to the world and for what they might bring to the world. You know, awareness of our gifts makes it increasingly possible to harness those gifts you can offer to the world. And when people offer their gifts to the world, creativity benefits as the mix of their gifts with others generates new ideas and new possibilities. In our conversation today, we're going to focus on creativity, which to me is an extension of curiosity. If you don't get curious about what is around the corner, how will you ever imagine another world, let alone create one? If you're a person who is serious about your career, you know that creating new possibilities keeps options opening up for you so that you can offer your unique gifts. And speaking of gifts, today we have an amazing gift for you. Today we're going to have a conversation with a luminary in the field. If you haven't heard of her before, it's only because you don't know her field. I guarantee that you will value meeting her today so that you can say, you know who Diana Whitney is. Diana, happy to have you with us.
Hi, Madeline. I am delighted to be here.
You know, I want to tell our audience a little bit more about you. Diana Whitney is founder and president emerita of the Corporation for Positive Change, a consulting firm dedicated to the creation of appreciative organizations. She is an internationally recognized consultant and an inspiring keynote speaker, and I can tell you that from experience, and a pioneering thought leader on many topics, including our topic today. She is a founder of the Taos Institute, a fellow of the World Business Academy, and a distinguished faculty with Saybrook University. She has written and co-authored many books, with her latest being Appreciative Leadership, Focus on What Works to Drive Winning Performance and Build a Thriving Organization. I am so deeply honored to have you join me today. Diana Whitney, welcome again to Unlocked.
Thank you very much, Madeline. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I'm anxious to get into our conversation. That was such a rich opening.
Oh, thank you. Good, good. I was hoping that would be the case. Well, you know, I always like for our audience to get to know the guest at another level. So I'm curious. You would take this moment and begin maybe to tell the audience a bit about your path, you know, and why you're doing what you do today.
Well, that in of itself is a great question that everyone should write down and ask people that they meet. You know, when you talk about questions, there's a good one. It's interesting. I'm going to build on a couple of things that you said in your introduction. You used the word pioneering. And I have found myself as a woman now in my 70s, having my career at a time when women were just unlocking doors, just walking through new doors, just beginning to say, I'm here, listen to me, and to be able to make a difference in the world, to bring their gifts, their strengths to the world. So I have long thought of myself as a pioneer. And when you are a pioneer, you need to develop the abilities to sense what's going on because you're always on new ground and just sort out what's going to be most useful for yourself and for others. So I began going to college. I was a debater in college, thinking I might go to law school, you know, and fight the good fight. And over time, I realized that I was more intrigued with the field of communication. And so I ended up getting a PhD in communication and looking at the world through the lens of communication in a slightly different way. Because so much communication is, I have an idea and I have to make my idea so good that everybody else is going to love it. When in fact, I've come to understand communication is the way that you and I, the other people that we engage with, create a meaningful world. The communication is our most precious tool for making meaning and creating or co-creating an understanding that allows us to go forward together. And so from there, I began doing my consulting and ended up, you know, I'm not sure how, working with very large corporations. I like to say, when I was a kid growing up and I'd have my morning cereal, I didn't know that cereal was produced by a corporation. Or we'd get in the family car and go on a trip. I didn't know that General Motors was a corporation. But in my career, I began working with CEOs and their teams and helping them to really understand the idea of creating a culture among the people. And my work was very much about helping others in service of others who were wanting to create a more humane social fabric in the workplace. And as you know, I've been very fortunate to work around the world with large corporations, with communities, with just a large number of organizations. And it's been a gift to me to do this work and to learn and grow as I worked.
Oh, I love the fact that you shared what you did, and showing that clearly you have never stopped learning on all this path. It just keeps opening up and opening up and opening up. Yeah, there is a phrase, you didn't use it, but I'm gonna introduce it because many of my guests have used the term appreciative inquiry. And when I ask them to describe it, I'm never satisfied. But I know that you can give language to that, because so that path that you just described was really an appreciative path.
Well, let's again play with the language that you began with, and that is curiosity. Inquiry is curiosity. We can call it research. When you're in the university, inquiry is research. When you're a consultant, doing inquiry might be a survey or research, but it's curiosity. And so appreciative inquiry asks us to be curious about what works, to really put our attention on people's strengths, high performance patterns, on what makes things work well. As an example, I was recently reading about a favorite artist of mine from Taos, New Mexico, and at one point she spent a year with a camera studying beauty. That's all she did. This is Agnes Martin. She didn't paint. She didn't do the work that she's known for. She just spent 1 year dedicated to the discovery of beauty through the lens of her camera. Now that I would call appreciative inquiry. She was curious. She was looking for beauty, and she wanted to expand her possibilities of beauty. Now, I'm sure that influenced her art when she came back to painting, right? So appreciative inquiry is the study, the questions about, the curiosity about what works well when life is at its best. Now, the one thing I will say, Madelyn, there's a caveat. We know that life is not always at its best. It's just not. I wake up grumpy some days, right? I have days that are going smoothly that I look around and I go, and then there's other days I go, why are they doing that? And we've got a lot of the why are they doing that in our lives these days. But the antidote to that is the curiosity about goodness, about beauty, about success, about what works well, about joy. We can add a lot to our inquiry to really expand our repertoire of positive possibilities.
The word that really hit me was that word beauty. What a magnificent thing to decide, because I bet if people looked at all the photographs that she took, they might say, oh, that's beautiful. Why did you photograph that one? Where's the beauty there? And yet I bet, I suspect that if you thought about it, you just sat back and then you would see the beauty in it. I remember when I went to the Wharton School, they asked a question. Oftentimes when you go to graduate school, they ask you to write essays. Well, you had to say 3 reasons why, three things that were important to you. And of course, you really thought about the first one, and you really thought about the second one. And the last one, you always put in money, because this is the Wharton School. And it turned out, and I found out this later, many years later, that in admissions, they only looked at the second one. They said, because the first one, you're gaming it. And the last one is always finance. But it's the middle one. And my middle one was beauty.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
I'm curious. I'm curious what beauty means to you. Because when we take beauty, a word like beauty, a concept like beauty, we also, as you pointed out, understand that it means different things to different people.
mhm.
And so I'm curious to you, Madelyn, what does beauty mean?
Oh, I'm getting chills to say this. To me, beauty is something that opens your heart.
Mm.
And it could be a beautiful landscape,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be the face of a grandmother
Mm-hmm.
as she holds the grandchild, wrinkled, gnarled, but what you see is the love. So that's how I define it. I
Thank
don't know how other people do.
Well, I want to add to that because we're talking about success in career. In my experience, beauty is also a job well done.
Oh, yes.
Oh, it's when people, yes, we worked late, we put in some extra hours, but then we sat back and look at the book that came out of our work. Or,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, people are just having such a great time at this meeting that we planned. Or, oh, by the way, the moonshot.
Mhm.
Beauty can be in the quality of our work, the
Mhm.
completion of our work. It can also be the joy of a special relationship.
Mhm.
It's those
Yeah.
relationships where you just go, and it is heart opening. I really love that part of your definition. Yeah, that person is a curmudgeon, but they're beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's understanding and being curious, to go back to that, being curious also about our differences
Mhm.
and learning so that when the time comes and we are faced with something that we think we've never faced before, we have a repertoire of resources, behaviors, practices, ideas that we can creatively put together, probably in a new way, and then we can go forward.
Mm. I like that. It it suggests to me another another dimension of this, and that is listening. Because
Mm,
when you ask questions, there is that there is that flip side, which is you don't ask the question so that you can um, let someone ramble. You ask it because you're really interested in the answer. I wonder if you just talk about that, and because well, okay, I'll leave it at that.
well, listening is probably more important than speaking. There's it's a kind of a joke. If we were meant to speak more and listen less, we would have been given two mouths and one ear. So just that idea. But on a more serious note, um, listening is a way of witnessing another person.
Oh,
And not only are we learning in the process, but we are supporting the other person be their best. If we are a good listener, we have put aside our own ideas, our own, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. And we are profoundly curious about the way the other person or people are making sense of the world. And by being curious of the way they make sense of the world, we are witnessing their most authentic, their deepest self, and we are helping them make meaning of their own lives. That's what listening is for me when it's at its best. And in that process, I am gathering knowledge of the other person, knowledge of how things are done. I'm just so much that may be useful to me in the future. But for right now, I'm able to humbly put myself on the back burner and really hear the words, the tonality, the unspoken things. You know, we talk about listening between the lines, and it's a hard skill. It's a hard skill to develop. But if we are able to use a person's own words, so for example, you and I just had a little play with the word beauty. I don't even remember who said it first, but we were asking each other about it. And I know for me, I then got to experience beauty. So that's the other part of listening. When we listen through the lens of the other's words and we're seeking to witness them in their fullest, we're giving a gift, perhaps one of the greatest gifts we can give another person.
I fully agree with you there, because in that moment, in that listening moment, you used some other words which I don't remember, but what I saw in my mind was that there were two people, and suddenly they began to almost touch. They belonged to one another. So you really are offering that sense of belonging as well, just through the act of listening.
Yes. Yes. And that's something that we all want.
Yeah.
Everyone wants that sense of belonging. Some of us have it more than others, but it's one of the things that we can be creative about creating together.
In fact, I think when you feel that sense of belonging to a group, you are more creative, literally, because you're relaxed. And if nothing else, being relaxed, your brain functions better.
It's what some people speak and write about: safe space.
Yeah.
Right? Safe space, physically, safe space emotionally, and safe space socially.
Yeah.
Right? I know that you respect who I am and my identity.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a time and a place to challenge my identity. But that's not what we do to friends or colleagues or even our people that report to us. We're to help them grow their identity, fulfill it, fill it out, learn about their gifts and their strengths and what they have to give to the world.
In light of that, I want to remind our audience that if you're on LinkedIn or watching on YouTube, you can send us questions or comments. I'm monitoring that periodically during the show, so please send us your comments. Well, I want to shift our gears just slightly, Diana, because now I'm curious. Let's say if I'm a leader, how can I do this myself, especially when things are moving so fast, and if the person is talking face to, it's just a box on a Zoom call. What are some thoughts you have on it?
Oh, wow. Well, I think the question is, what is it that we're asking leaders to do? Certainly ask questions. Certainly listen. So how does a leader do it? Perhaps they prepare before their meeting with a series of questions that they may or may not ask. So I can remember we were working with a client who was very concerned about cost savings in it happened to be a male leader in his organization, very concerned. And yet he never asked people about it. He just said, do this, pay attention to cost. So we helped him create a series of questions. Where do you think we can save the most money in your department? When in the past couple of months have you made a decision that saved money for your department?
Yeah.
Who in the department do you think is really best at being cost conscious?
Yeah.
And all those questions led to information and stories, which I know you value, Madeline, stories about how they were doing it right. So instead of setting up a do this, I'll punish you if you don't, or there'll be consequences, he was setting up, I believe in you. I
Yeah.
see that you've already done this.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you've done it, because maybe if we learn how you've done it, others in the company can do it the same way. So coming prepared with a set of appreciative questions rather than a set of prescriptions is one thing. Then giving people opportunities to talk with each other, really encouraging members of one group to talk to another group, members of one department to talk to another department. Not a formal retreat, but just go have a conversation, find out what they're doing. And so part of leadership is giving people permission to be curious and creative, and asking, what experiments might we try? That's one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite with my clients. Well, what experiment can you try in the next month before we talk and meet again that we can see what can be learned? So there's just a whole language of curiosity, creativity, possibility. And when leaders take on that language instead of the language of right and wrong, prescribe and judge,
Mm-hmm.
leadership is a whole different experience.
It is indeed. I can tell you it is indeed. And it and I loved your example, find out how so and so does it because clearly they know how to keep their budget in line and they save money. And the interesting thing is that what they do may not be possible in your setting, but it stimulates an idea.
That's right.
Oh, they do it that way. Well, we can't do that exactly, but we can adjust it. And you come up with a new idea.
Madeline, that is just essentially important, because so often people stop at, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Our department is different. I'm different. I can't do what you do. And we forget that we can adapt. I mean, come on. We all had grandmothers who made delicious food with a little of this, a little of that.
Mhm.
They, didn't follow a rigid recipe. And they would never say, I can't make that. They'd say, oh, give me your recipe for apple brown Betty and I'll try it. And so really going back to, I love thinking about my grandmothers and how they did life. I get so inspired
Yes.
by each of them differently. And that idea of how do we adapt, especially in the face of change, in the face of uncertainty. I mean, uncertainty, after all, is an invitation to adaptation. It is not an invitation to do the same thing. I mean, if we could do the same thing, it wouldn't be uncertain. But when we are faced with uncertainty, with unknowing, adapt away, see how it works.
Mhm.
Study the results of your own experiments. Be curious about them.
Yeah. I love that. Uncertainty is an invitation to adaptation. My definition of resilience is that it happens in that space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl talked about.
Yes.
You make a decision in that space that you're going to do something to move on. It is an invitation to adapt yourself and move on.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. It's a great new addition to my stuff. Thank you.
Well, I as I think about Unlocked and I think about resiliency, for me, there's just this simple connection. And that is, the more curious I am, the more I expand my repertoire of possibilities So in those moments, right at that point between stimulus and response, I can be creative.
Yeah.
You know, oh, yeah. So it's very easy to say, not always easy to do by any means, because we
Mm.
also go from, you know, something triggers us. We're living in a world of so many triggers.
Mm.
People who've had trauma, people who have. I have a neighbor who ghosted me when I wanted to. I contacted her several times just to talk about some new building that we're doing and didn't get responses. And I thought, that's for me, that's an unusual thing. And then I said, give that person the benefit of the doubt. Something is going on in their world that I may or may not understand. In fact, I mostly don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another piece of it is self-reflection rather than other blaming. We are more resilient, more creative when we are willing to look at ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and what we can do to serve the world rather than what we can do to complain about the world or some other person. So appreciative inquiry doesn't value complaining very much.
Well, it doesn't get you anywhere.
It doesn't get you anywhere.
Well, you know, I love the way you describe this because uh, one of the practices that I suggest to people that they do is they each day to write a little story from their life. I mean,
Oh,
it could be from 5 minutes ago or from when they were five, it doesn't matter. Because as you write those stories, you begin to see the things that actually formed you.
yes.
And it's that self-reflection. That's really what you're talking about. And here is a great opportunity. You're just looking in a mirror. And it gives you practice, if you will, so that when you meet the situation that you just described, a neighbor who did not respond,
Right.
well, let me think about that. Maybe there's something else.
You know, Madeline, it's interesting. I knew I was going to talk to you today, so I've been thinking about these ideas for a couple of days, and I had an insight that I think is related to my own career development, and that is for the early days of my career, I spent a lot of my time cultivating my own capabilities and my own character, knowing my values, really developing myself so that I could do a lot. But I knew that was the key. I was learning what my strengths are and I was developing them. But then there came a phase of my working life when the question became, how do I apply my capabilities, my strengths, my gifts, to use your language, in the service of other people and the world? What is it that I offer? And that's the point of one's calling.
Mm.
My favorite definition of calling is that it's the intersection of our greatest gifts and the world's greatest needs.
Ooh, nice.
You know, and so there comes a time where I say, okay, enough about me. I know my high performance pattern. I know that I see big pictures. I know that I get really inspirational and get a whole bunch of people around me and say, hey, let's give this a try. And I know that often I can see what's possible that other people can't see. You know, I know some of my strengths. It's helped me write books. It's helped me do very large scale work. And then the question is, now, how do I put that to best use? And that question of application changes because what I'm now looking at, given what's going on in the world and my life, is that I'm looking for opportunities locally rather than globally. Having worked for 35 years, 40 years around the world, I now ask myself the question, how can I bring my strengths and my gifts in support of my local community?
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, even my family, because I have got some of the most awesome young nieces nephews, and I want to make sure they've garner my wisdom as they want it, that it's there for them. And so I have become a resource to the next generation and having fun with projects in my local community.
Can you describe an example of one of those?
Well, it's very different than what used to be, than my work used to be. I have this house in the mountains, which is primarily summertime, but it's maybe 3 seasons around. And I've organized an art group. I've managed to reserve the facilities every Friday afternoon. I've managed to bring artists in who can teach people. I've got people coming and learning what materials they need and how to do things. And this just didn't exist before. And so I've brought um, my skills into a new community at a much smaller level, but very meaningful for those involved and for me.
Ah, that's a great example, because it's something that, okay, you may not be an artist and you may not want to do art, but just creating a space where people can come together and learn something, do something together. You're not what I'm hearing is you don't have to say, what's the political agenda here and how do I plug in? No, it's just simply making a better world.
And it does that because everyone is welcome.
Yeah.
They just have to say, hey, I'm curious. Can I come play one week or can I come more often? And I know some of the people who come we are not aligned in our political values. But you know what? It's okay
Yeah.
because we're building bridges. We're building bridges, and that's what's important.
Mm-hmm.
For us, for humanity to go forward, for societies to go forward, we need to build bridges, little and large, local and international, that allow people to cross over into each other's worlds.
Oh, I love the images that are coming to my mind as you say that. Really nice. And I love the fact that it exists at many, many levels.
At many levels. And so I guess that's my message to our audience today. You may be just at that phase of life where you're working on yourself, and that is okay. If you are at a point where you're going, I'm not sure I really have a good grasp of me, then work on learning your skills, practicing your skills. Take life on as a new sport. Get good at it. But then you also may be at a level where you're saying, okay, my family, I can do these things within my family system that make a difference for us now and the next generation. Or you may be in your community, or you may be out there working and getting your brand going and be impacting the world in big ways. And all of that is good. And the key to it is to know your own rhythm. When is it your time to be out there? But if you're on the edge of burnout, come on back in. Get curious about some of the subtler, smaller things in life. Get curious about meditation. Get curious about mindfulness. Get curious about having a cup of tea with a neighbor. Then you'll get recharged and get back out to the big things.
Oh, that's marvelous. Marvelous advice. And maybe I was going to ask you the question, if you were a young person just starting out in your career, what was your advice to them? I think you've said some of it, but let me ask the question again and see if there's anything you would add to it specifically. Because you described for yourself, you began your career really beefing up your competencies.
Yes. I just said this to my partner's daughter. I just said this recently. She said, I've applied for this job and I'm terrified. And I said, good for you. Because if you're not terrified, you're not working big enough. So don't let terror, fear hold you down. Know that there's a place that we call kind of proximal distance, that you want to be nervous, you want to have some anxiety, because that's going to give you the energy to go for it, to learn. If you don't know what's going on, you're going to learn. But if you are working at a level where you know everything, where you've already done it, that's okay. Once in a while, you need a job that's like peanut butter and jelly. It just feeds you. But know when it's time to go bigger again. So if you're terrified, that's a good thing. That means you're stretching and you're growing and you're going for something that you'll be able to help the world even more.
Great. Okay. One more question.
All right.
I want you to think about your life. And all of us hit these moments that are unexpected. What was an unexpected moment in your life where you had to figure out how to overcome and move on? What if you could share one of those with our audience?
I've had a lot of them because I like living in the kind of edginess. I am fond of saying, my clients know, my students know, I say innovation is on the edge. It's not the same old, same old. I go back to my early days when I was asked to help integrate healthcare organizations. I was asked to help integrate 20-some organizations that were spread out over the United States and make one new company. And the surprise for me, among other things, was that I walked into the office of the woman who would become my client, and there were pictures on her wall of people I knew. And so we created this relational bond in the beginning. And we spent a fair amount of time talking about, in this case, they were professors. They were her professors from Purdue and people whose research I had studied and people whose work I had really admired. So she and I began by getting to know each other. And to this day, we're very dear friends 40-some years later. But to think that I was called in to do important work and then being surprised by the relational twist that making a friend is what enabled us to succeed. Yeah, that was one of them, Madelyn. How about you? Do you have a story of a surprise that got you where you are today?
Well, your first comment was there are lots of them. Yes, there are lots of them. I think the one that to me I have it's one of the stories from my life, and it constantly is an inspiration even for myself. When I was growing up, I had a mother who spoke 3 languages and could spell in 3 languages. And so whenever I needed to spell a word, I would just ask her and she would tell me how to spell it and I would write it down. And so I never learned how to spell. Now, even in high school, although she kept telling me not to go to the dictionary, I still never did because I studied mathematics in high school and in college. And in mathematics, you don't worry about spelling. You're worrying about other things. I'm 28. And I was named the director of institutional research at the University of Maine for the whole statewide. Well, that was pretty awesome for a 28-year-old. But I realized, oh my, I don't know how to spell. And if and if I write a report and it has a misspelling in it, they'll know I'm a fraud, or they'll think I'm a fraud. So I decided that I would look up every word I was even remotely uncertain about how to spell. And I would do that for 1 year. And so for 1 year, I looked up all kinds of words because I had to, right?
Right.
I got to the end of the year and I actually had become a credible speller. At least I could relax a little bit when I was writing. But the interesting thing was that year, I happened to take my graduate record exams, the GREs, to go to graduate school. Well, I knew I would ace the math side because that was what I had studied, right? What I didn't expect was that I aced verbal comprehension.
Wow. Yes, right.
So there was a case, just like you didn't realize the relationships were what was going to carry you through it.
Right.
In my case, it was this other thing.
There's one more story though I will add because it was very poignant and early in my career. And the lesson that it taught me is I never know why I am where I am in terms of the work I'm doing. A client may say, oh, do team building, we need goals. When in fact, what it turns out is something very different. And this story is that I was asked to work with a team of executives in Toronto. And I went to Toronto to interview them each. And I spent over 2 hours with each of these 6 or 7 executives. And my last interview was on a Friday afternoon. And I was with their medical director, a delightful, delightful person who was way beyond retirement age, but loved his work. And everyone else in their interviews had said that they had some worry about him. They wished he would retire. Well, I went home, and on Saturday afternoon, I got a phone call. And it turns out that this gentleman had passed away. And I had his last words.
Wow.
So I had to really examine for myself what was and is an ethic of my consulting work. And that is you don't share information you get from one person with another. But after really doing a self-examination, and because most of my questions even then were appreciative questions, I said, yes, I would go back up to Toronto that week. And again, I would meet with each of those executives. And I found myself doing an grief counseling. Here I am in my early 30s, and I'm way over what I thought my head was, way over the water level. But it was very touching, moving, and just the right thing to do. I ended up working with that particular group of people for several years after that. But in that situation, I had no idea what I was going to be asked to do. But when asked, I said yes.
That's an amazing story. That's a truly amazing story. Just your presence there was, and the fact that you were listening, because at 30, you know how to listen. And it gave them that opportunity. Yeah. Marvelous story. Oh, wow. This has been an unbelievable conversation, Diana. I knew it would be when I invited you. And it has
They always are when we get together, Madelyn.
This is true. This is true.
Fabulous.
I love your phrase, listening is witnessing the other person. I love that phrase. So before we end, though, I want to make sure that 2 things. One, if there's anything more that you want to say to our audience, and also how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I think that my key message, recognizing that everything we do and everything that's meaningful to us is done relationally, that we co-create the world. but that you are your own greatest resource. So my message is trust yourself, trust your own intuition, that wherever you are in your career is just right on right now. So it's that delicate movement of life in relationship and life in your own skin that we always have to manage. So with that, I wish you all continued success.
Fantastic. And Diana, how can people get in touch with you?
I think the best way is through Diana at positivechange.org.
Okay.
It's my email address, and I am happy to hear from you, and will do my best to respond.
Oh, great. Well, Diana Whitney, you are a star. You shine your light in a world that most definitely needs greater light, greater understanding, richer creativity, and more humane actions. Now, I want to make sure that people check out your books. Now, these are the two latest books, Thriving Women, Thriving World, and Appreciative Leadership. Ah, wow. Well, with that, again, thank you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Madelyn.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm incredibly delighted and happy to have experienced that conversation. In a moment, I'm going to tell you about next week's exciting guest, but first, I hope you found this conversation useful. And if you have, make a comment in social media about what you learned and will do differently as a result. And if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, click the like button and make a comment. And as always, send me your ideas of what you would like to hear more about. Just write to me at madelyn@madelynblair.com. It's right on the screen there for you. What would be helpful for you to hear about? Let me know. And if I use your topic, you will receive a copy of my book, Essays in Two Voices, being used across 4 continents. And remember that the archives of all of our shows are at www.madelynblair.com/media. Just scroll down and get some inspiration. And check out my book, Unlocked, on Amazon. Now, for next week. Next week, Dr. David Fessel, the former professor of musculoskeletal radiology at the University of Michigan and faculty at the UM Ross School of Business, will be joining us. And he'll be joining us for the 3rd time. Now, he's a medical doctor who saw the healing aspects of humor. So don't miss him and my co-host next week, Ed Hoffman, on July the 6th for a very enjoyable, dare I say, funny episode. Thank you for joining us on this segment of Unlocked. Excuse me, I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.